He walked into a police station, his hands covered in blood. He said, "I think I've killed someone, but I don't remember doing it." What if a person could kill while they were asleep? This is the chilling, unbelievable true story of Kenneth Parks, the man who killed in his sleep. Welcome to English Stories, the channel where every tale is more than just words. It's a journey through emotion, truth, and the deepest corners of the human mind. Here, we tell stories that help you feel English, not just learn it. So sit back, listen carefully, and let this true story take you into a mystery that even science struggled to explain. Before we step into Kenneth's story, let's understand what sleepwalking really means. Sleepwalking, also known as somnambulism, is a condition where a person moves, walks, or even performs complex actions while still asleep. It usually happens during the deepest stage of sleep, called non-REM sleep. In this state, the brain is partly asleep, but the body is active. The person's eyes might be open, and they might look awake, but their mind is completely disconnected. Many children experience mild sleepwalking. Some people simply walk around, talk, or open a door. But in rare cases, very rare, the brain can push the body to do things far more dangerous. Doctors say stress, lack of sleep, or emotional trauma can increase the risk. The person does not remember what happened. To them, it's as if time has jumped. They fall asleep in one place and wake up somewhere else. Now, imagine if during one of those episodes, someone acted out a violent dream. That's exactly what happened in the strange and tragic case of Kenneth Parks. The story of Kenneth Parks. It was a cool night in May 1987, in a quiet suburb near Toronto, Canada. The streets were still, and most homes were asleep. Inside a small apartment, 23-year-old Kenneth Parks sat in front of his television. The glow from the screen flickered across his tired face. His wife was already in bed, and their baby girl slept peacefully in her crib. Kenneth had a lot on his mind. He was a young father, newly married, and trying to keep his family stable. But behind the smile he wore each day, he was crumbling. He had developed a gambling addiction: horse races, betting, endless promises of quick money. He had borrowed money, lost it, and then in a desperate move he had embezzled funds from his employer. When the truth came out, he lost his job. Now he was unemployed, drowning in debt, ashamed, and afraid to face his family. He loved his wife and adored his in-laws Barbara and Dennis Woods, who had treated him like a son. He planned to visit them the next day to confess everything and ask for help. But Kenneth's mind was exhausted. He hadn't slept properly for days. His anxiety and guilt churned inside him like a storm. That night, he finally lay down on the couch, watching Saturday Night Live. At some point, he drifted into sleep, but it was not peaceful sleep. Something inside him, something deep, subconscious, had awakened. Around 3 a.m., Kenneth's body rose from the couch, but his mind remained asleep. He walked to his car, barefoot, half-dressed, his eyes open but blank. Neighbors who later saw him described his movement as slow, robotic, dreamlike. He got into his car and started it all while asleep. Then he drove 23 kilometers, about 14 miles, through the quiet city streets, never waking up. He stopped outside his in-laws' home. He used his own key to enter quietly. Inside, Barbara and Dennis were sleeping peacefully. It was dark, silent, ordinary. But Kenneth's sleeping brain was trapped in a nightmare he would never remember. What happened next was brutal and tragic. In his unconscious state, he attacked Barbara with a tire iron he had taken from his car, and also injured Dennis, who tried to fight back. Barbara died at the scene. Dennis, though severely wounded, survived. The strange part, Kenneth's actions were automatic, like a person acting out a dream. There was no shouting, no hesitation, no emotional rage, just movement. When the violence stopped, Kenneth left the house. Still asleep, he drove again, this time toward the police station. "I think I've killed someone." At 4:45 a.m., police officers at the Scarborough station saw a car pull up outside. A young man stumbled out, his white shirt soaked with blood, his hands deeply cut. He looked dazed and confused. His voice trembled. "I think I've killed someone," he said softly. "My hands, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law." Officers thought he was the victim of an attack, but when they realized what he was saying, the room fell silent. He didn't try to run. He didn't resist arrest. He just stood there, blank, pale, and terrified, as if waking up from a nightmare he didn't understand. When police reached the Woods house, they found the tragic scene. Barbara was gone. Dennis was rushed to the hospital and would later survive to tell the story. Even more confusing, Dennis insisted that Kenneth had no reason to harm them. He had always been kind and loving. So why did it happen? Detectives were puzzled. The motive was missing. The man was cooperative, and his face showed genuine shock, not guilt. Kenneth was taken to a hospital, where doctors examined his deep hand wounds, injuries consistent with having fought or gripped something hard. When questioned, he said only one thing: "I don't remember. I was home watching TV. Then I woke up here." Psychiatrists, neurologists, and sleep specialists began a long series of tests. They monitored his brain waves, interviewed his family, and studied his sleep patterns. Their findings were astonishing. Kenneth suffered from a severe sleep disorder. His parents and grandparents had histories of sleepwalking, sleep-talking, and night terrors. He himself had episodes in which he walked or talked in his sleep. The doctors explained that Kenneth had been under extreme stress, sleep-deprived, and emotionally unstable, the perfect storm to trigger a sleepwalking episode of unusual complexity. They concluded that he had likely entered a state of automatism, a rare phenomenon in which the body acts without conscious control. It meant Kenneth was, quite literally, asleep while doing everything: walking, driving, entering the house, and even attacking his in-laws. The case went to court in 1988 and soon became one of the most talked about legal cases in Canadian history. The prosecution argued that Kenneth was lying, that he had planned the murder to escape his financial problems. But the defense brought forward medical experts who had studied him for months. They presented evidence that his brain activity, family history, and psychological state fit the profile of a sleepwalking killer. They emphasized that Kenneth had no motive. He loved his in-laws deeply. He confessed immediately, never tried to hide, and appeared horrified when told what had happened. The courtroom was divided. How could a man drive a car, find an address, and commit a killing all while asleep? Doctors explained that during non-REM sleep, a person can perform complex actions because the motor parts of the brain are active while the thinking parts are off. The body can act, but the conscience is gone. One expert said, "He was in a state of automatism. His actions were not voluntary. He was not aware of them." After long deliberation, the jury reached a verdict that shocked the world. Not guilty. Kenneth Parks was acquitted of murder and attempted murder because the court accepted that he was sleepwalking during the incident. It was officially ruled non-insane automatism, meaning he was not suffering from mental illness, but rather a temporary unconscious state. The decision was upheld by the Supreme Court of Canada in 1992. The case became known as Reversus Parks and is still studied in law schools and medical universities today. Kenneth Parks walked out of court a free man, legally innocent, but emotionally shattered. He expressed deep sorrow for what had happened. He attended therapy, lived quietly, and stayed away from public attention. There are no reports of him ever repeating such an episode. The case changed how the world viewed sleep disorders and criminal responsibility. It forced scientists, lawyers, and the public to ask uncomfortable questions. Can someone be guilty if their mind was asleep? Is there justice when the law forgives, but a life is lost? Where does control end and instinct begin? For the families involved, there were no winners. A beloved mother was gone, a husband scarred forever, and a man who loved them both, forced to live with the unbearable truth that his own hands had caused it. Sleepwalking is often harmless: a child wandering down a hallway, an adult murmuring nonsense in their dreams. But Kenneth's case reminds us that the human mind is vast and mysterious. Even in sleep, hidden parts of our brain can awaken and act out the shadows of our emotions. It's terrifying, because it could happen to anyone under the right storm of stress, exhaustion, and pain. So the next time you drift into sleep, remember the line between dream and reality is thinner than you think. Thank you for listening to this true story on English Stories. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and share, because every story, real or imagined, teaches us something about life, about emotion, and about the strange mystery of being human. Until next time, sleep well, and may your dreams stay peaceful.